There's something special about stepping outside after a quiet night, dear friend, and seeing a few fallen branches scattered across the lawn. Some people might call it mess or clutter, but you and I, we know better. Those branches are gentle reminders that nature is always giving, always offering new little treasures to anyone willing to look closely. So pour yourself a warm cup of tea, settle in with me for a moment, and let's talk about how those simple weathered pieces of wood can become the start of something beautiful. You don't need youth strength or a wallet full of money, only the willingness to imagine what could be. I remember visiting an older neighbor years ago, a sweet woman named Eleanor, who lived alone but kept the most enchanting backyard I'd ever seen. She once told me that fallen branches feel like nature's second chances, and she gathered them in a wicker basket behind her porch. Every season, she turned them into something magical, a little trellis here, a tiny fence there, even a charming sculpture shaped like a bird stretching its wings. Her creations weren't perfect, but they were full of heart. You could feel the years of care in every twist of twine and every knot in the wood. That's the spirit we'll invite into today's video. As we walk through these ideas together, I hope you'll feel inspired, not pressured to try something new in your own garden. Creativity doesn't rush or demand. It whispers. And it's never too late to listen. So let's gently begin this journey and discover the beauty hiding in the branches at your feet. Have you ever come across an old wooden ladder leaning against a weathered barn in a quiet countryside town? Something about that simple shape, two long rails joined by steady rungs, feels comforting, dependable. Almost like an old friend standing guard over the garden. When you build a rustic ladder trellis from fallen branches, that same feeling comes alive right in your backyard. The beauty of this project lies in how forgiving it is. You don't need perfectly straight pieces or fancy tools. Nature's gentle imperfections give the trellis its charm. Choose branches that feel sturdy when you press your thumb against them, ones that carry a bit of weight, but still have the softness of age. Once, when I visited my cousin in rural Virginia, she showed me a ladder-style trellis she built from branches gathered after a summer storm. She was in her late 60s and laughed as she told me she could no longer kneel in the dirt for long hours, so she started gardening upward. She tied her branches together with jute twine, knotting them carefully while sitting in a shaded chair. In just an hour or two, she had created a tall, rustic frame that looked as though it belonged in a storybook cottage. A few weeks later, her morning glories curled around every rung, stretching for the sky like they were eager to show off their new home. What I love most about a ladder trellis is that it asks nothing of you except a little imagination. Lean it against a fence, a shed, or even a sturdy tree trunk. Let clematis, sweet peas, or even beans climb it at their own gentle pace. As they weave themselves upward, you'll see how the combination of soft greenery and weathered wood brings a piece that store-bought decor can never quite match. It becomes a quiet reminder that even fallen things can rise again when given purpose. There's a certain kind of music that only a garden can make, dear friend. The soft rattle of leaves brushing against one another, the faint whisper of wind sweeping through tall grass, the distant chirping of birds getting ready for the day. When you create wind chimes from old branches, you're not just making decor. You're adding your own voice to that natural symphony. And the beauty of this project is that it doesn't demand perfection. In fact, the more irregular the branches, the more interesting the sound becomes. Choose branches of different lengths and thicknesses, each one carrying its own tone. When they knock gently against each other, they create a melody that feels like a soft conversation with the breeze. I remember visiting a friend's mother, Miss Laverne, who lived near the Oregon coast. She was in her 70s, a gentle woman with nimble hands and a habit of collecting little pieces of nature during her morning walks. She once showed me a wind chime she'd made from driftwood thin branches and a few seashells she found on the shore. As we sat on her porch, a cool breeze passed through, and the chime began to sing. The sound wasn't sharp or loud. It was warm, earthy, and slightly echoing like a memory being retold. She said she made it during a lonely winter, simply wanting a sound that reminded her she wasn't alone. "The wind keeps me company," she whispered with a smile. You can create something just as meaningful. Suspend your branches with jute twine or even fishing line if you want a floating look. Add beads, bells, or smooth stones for little accents of color and sound. Hang the chime where the wind is gentle near a porch, a pergola, or window you often open in spring. Over time, the wood will weather, the colors will soften, and the chime will become a familiar friend greeting you with its soft song. It's amazing how something as simple as fallen branches can remind you that peace doesn't have to be silent. It can hum along beside you. There's something deeply satisfying about giving shape to a garden, especially when the materials come straight from the earth itself. Woven branch borders have that old-world charm you might remember from childhood visits to country farms or parks, where everything felt handcrafted and grounded. By weaving slender, flexible branches between simple vertical stakes, you're creating a living line, a natural frame that gently holds your garden beds together without feeling strict or artificial. These borders aren't meant to be perfect. They're meant to blend into the soil and plants as if they grew there on their own. I once helped an older gentleman named Frank, a retired teacher in his early 70s, set up woven borders around his vegetable beds. His knees weren't what they used to be, so we worked at a slow pace, sharing stories as we tucked each branch into place. Frank told me he grew up watching his grandmother weave willow fences around her potatoes and cabbages. She didn't call it gardening, he said with a chuckle. She called it tending. As we finished the last section, he stood back and nodded with the calm pride of someone who had reclaimed a piece of his family's past. Weeks later, he wrote to tell me that the little border did more than keep his mulch contained. It brought him back to simpler times every time he stepped outside. Creating your own woven border doesn't require heavy lifting or complicated tools. Use stakes no higher than your knee so you don't have to bend too far. Then weave the branches in and out with gentle pressure. Let them overlap, twist, or curve. Those natural shapes are what make the border beautiful. Over time, the wood will develop a soft, silvery look, blending gracefully with blooming flowers, dark soil, and bright green foliage. And every time you look at it, you'll have a quiet reminder that structure doesn't have to be strict. It can be soft, organic, and shaped by your own hands that still know how to create beauty at any age. There's a special magic that settles over the garden once the sun begins to slip behind the trees. The world softens, colors deepen, and even the smallest flicker of light feels comforting. That's why branch candle holders or solar light holders made from thick slices of fallen wood bring such warmth to an evening garden. They're simple to make and incredibly rewarding, especially because each piece of wood already carries its own story, years of growth, rings, textured bark knots, and curves gifted by weather and time. When you place a little glow inside that natural cradle, it feels like you're lighting up the history held within it. Some years ago, I visited a woman named Marlene, who spent most evenings on her back patio. She showed me a set of candle holders she made from branches that had fallen during a heavy spring wind. She was in her mid-60s, recovering from a hip surgery, and wasn't able to kneel or lift much. So she worked from a sturdy chair at her outdoor table, sanding each branch slice slowly and carefully. She used a simple hand drill to create a space for tea lights. And when she lit them that night, her whole patio glowed like a quiet woodland retreat. She said the soft light helped her feel grounded again after months of recovery. "It reminds me," she said gently, "that everything heals in its own time, including us." You can create that same peaceful charm in your own space. Choose thick branch sections that feel solid and balanced. drill a shallow opening large enough for a candle or solar light. If you prefer a no-flame option, solar stake lights work beautifully. Just remove the stake and nestle the light into the wooden holder. Place these pieces along a walkway, on a patio table, or tucked near your favorite planters. As evening settles in, the lights will cast gentle shadows through the bark's ridges, turning an ordinary night into a cozy moment of calm. And each time you see those flickering reflections, you'll be reminded that beauty doesn't need to be store-bought. It can be shaped by your own hands, slowly and lovingly. Just like everything else that truly matters. There's a certain delight that comes from creating something tiny, something that feels like a secret tucked into the corner of your garden. Miniature fairy gardens have that magical quality, the sense that if you were quiet enough and patient enough, you might just see a little figure wandering down a pebble path. And when you use fallen branches and twigs to build the fences, gates, and tiny arbors for that miniature world, the charm becomes even more authentic. Every twist of the wood and every uneven edge adds to the story, reminding you that even in small creations, nature likes to leave her fingerprints. I once knew a widower named Helen, a quiet woman in her 70s, who spent every spring decorating a small fairy village under her maple tree. After her husband passed, she told me she felt the world had become too big, too loud. So she began building tiny things, little arbors, miniature fences, and delicate twig gates fashioned from branches she gathered during her morning walks. She glued them together while sitting at her kitchen table, working slowly, pausing often and smiling to herself, as if remembering old stories. One afternoon, she showed me the newest addition, a tiny twig ladder, leaning against a miniature moss-covered cottage. She whispered, "I like to think tiny visitors climb up when I'm not looking." That small village became her comfort, her way of tending to grief while creating something hopeful and sweet. You can create your own small world too without bending or straining. Choose thin twigs that are easy to snap or trim with light hand tools. Use a bit of wood glue or twine to connect pieces into tiny fences, gates, or arched entrances. Add patches of moss, little stones, dollhouse-sized planters, or miniature herbs like thyme and chamomile. Place your fairy structures in a shady spot where the soil stays moist and the greenery thrives. Over time, the twigs will age, the moss will spread, and the whole scene will look as if it simply grew there on its own. And every time you pass by, you'll feel a small spark of joy, a reminder that imagination doesn't fade with age. Often it grows deeper. Word count 347. There's something regal about an obelisk rising from a garden bed, even when it's made from something as humble as fallen branches. A branch obelisk has a quiet elegance to it, a gentle way of guiding plants upward while adding height and structure to your space. It's the kind of garden feature you might see in an old English cottage garden, standing like a natural sculpture wrapped in greenery. And the beauty of making one yourself is that it doesn't require heavy lifting or complicated building skills. You're simply inviting branches to lean into one another, supporting each other the way old friends do. Years ago, I visited a gardener named Mrs. Patton, an 82-year-old retired librarian who grew herbs with more passion than anyone I've ever met. She had a tiny backyard, barely enough room for a few raised beds. Yet her garden felt layered, full, vibrant. The secret was vertical growing. She showed me a tall, rustic obelisk she crafted from 6 straight branches, tied gently at the top. It held up a climbing variety of oregano that grew in spirals around the frame. She told me she built it during a summer when her hands had grown stiff with arthritis, so she did everything sitting down, tying, adjusting, shaping. "It doesn't need to be perfect," she said lightly, tapping the wood. "It just needs to stand tall like we try to do." Building one yourself can be just as simple and meaningful. Gather 4 to 6 branches that feel sturdy and long enough to form a tower shape. Bundle the tops together with twine or jute something soft, something natural. Spread the bottoms outward like the legs of a tripod, pressing them gently into the soil so the structure holds steady. Then add horizontal supports, shorter branches tied across the frame, to give herbs like oregano, thyme, jasmine, or sweet peas places to grab onto. As the plants climb, you'll notice how the obelisk becomes less a structure and more a living sculpture, a mix of bark, leaves, and memory. Over time, the wood will age, the knots will darken, and the herbs will wrap themselves around the frame in soft green spirals. It's a reminder that we all grow upward in our own way, leaning on what supports us, reaching gently for the light. There's a peaceful kind of companionship that comes from sharing your garden with birds. They bring a gentle rhythm to the day-morning songs, fluttering wings, tiny feet, tapping on branches as they decide where to land. When you turn fallen branches into artistic bird perches, you're not just decorating your garden. You're creating a welcoming space for wildlife, a place where nature feels invited and appreciated. The best perches aren't perfectly straight or smooth. They're the ones with character branches, shaped by seasons of windbark patterns that tell their own stories, little offshoots that give birds a place to hop and explore. I once met a gentleman named Harold who lived alone after retiring from decades of postal work. At 72, he spent most of his mornings sitting by his window with a cup of warm tea, watching birds gather in his backyard. But one winter, a storm knocked down several branches from his old maple tree. Instead of tossing them away, he pressed them upright into the soil near his favorite window view, securing them with large stones. Over time, he added a small feeder to one branch, a shallow water dish to another, and tucked a bit of nesting material into the crook of a third. By spring, the garden was bustling. Sparrows perched on the tallest limb finches explored the side shoots, and a curious robin built her nest nearby. When I visited, Harold told me those branches brought him more joy than any store-bought feeder ever had. "They feel honest," he said quietly. "Like the birds know this place is real." You can create that same sense of connection. Choose branches that feel sturdy but beautifully imperfect ones, with natural Y shapes or interesting curves. Press them into the ground a few inches, or secure them in a pot filled with heavy soil so you don't have to bend. Add a small feeder, a bit of seed, or even a shallow dish for fresh water. Place your perches near a window you love, or along a quiet garden path where you like to rest. Birds will find their way, exploring each height and shape, turning your simple branch installation into a living sculpture. And each visit, a flutter, a chirp, a moment of stillness, becomes a reminder that your garden is not just yours. It's part of a larger, gentle world that thrives when you make space for it. One of the quiet frustrations of gardening, especially as we get older, is bending down again and again to pick up tools we just put aside a moment earlier. A trowel here, pruning shears there. Before long, everything feels scattered. That's why branch hooks made from simple Y-shaped limbs bring such unexpected relief. They're practical, charming, and completely free. You're not just hanging tools, you're creating order in a gentle, natural way that blends beautifully with the outdoors. And the best part? These hooks look like they've always belonged there, as if the garden itself offered them up to make your days a little easier. Some years ago, I helped a woman named Doris reorganize the side of her old wooden shed. She was 76, spry in spirit, but limited in how much bending she could do after a back injury. When we gathered a pile of fallen branches from her yard, she picked up a forked one and laughed softly. "This looks like it's reaching out to help me." And in a way it was. We trimmed the ends, sanded the rough spots, and screwed a row of these branch hooks onto the fence beside her potting table, placing each one at a height where she could reach without stretching or stooping. When we finished, she stood back and smiled in that warm, proud way only gardeners do. Her pruners hung neatly, her gloves dangled in pairs. Even her small watering can had its own place. "It feels like my garden is talking back to me," she said. "You can recreate that same sense of ease and beauty in your own space." Look for branches that naturally form a fork or Y shape. Those will cradle tools securely. Cut them to a length that feels comfortable to hold. If drilling feels difficult, you can use heavy-duty outdoor adhesive or mount them using simple metal brackets so you don't have to strain. Arrange the hooks in a row or cluster depending on your needs, everything at eye level or just slightly below so you avoid discomfort. Over time, the hooks will weather gracefully, their bark softening into silvery browns and muted tans. Paired with the tools you use every day, they become part of the rhythm of your gardening life. And every time you reach for a trowel or slip your gloves from their wooden hook, you'll feel that small, satisfying moment of calm and the sense that your garden is not just a place you manage, but a place that supports you right back. There's something mesmerizing about gentle movement in a garden. The subtle shift of leaves, the soft sway of tall grasses, the way sunlight flickers through branches like a quiet heartbeat. A branch mobile brings that magic into focus. Made from simple suspended pieces of wood, balanced delicately in the air, a mobile becomes a living sculpture that dances with the breeze. What makes this project so special is how deeply personal it can be. Every branch, every feather, every stone you add carries its own memory, its own small story. And when the wind touches it, those stories move in harmony. I once spent an afternoon with a retired art teacher named Lucinda, who lived in a little cottage shaded by old oak trees. She had limited mobility after a knee replacement, so she crafted her branch mobile entirely from her porch chair. She gathered slender branches with interesting bends, some smoothed by rain, others still wearing bits of moss. From each branch, she hung small treasures collected over the years, a polished stone from a trip with her grandchildren, a few painted shells from her late husband's fishing days, and delicate dried flowers she'd pressed between book pages decades earlier. When the wind stirred, the mobile swayed with a soft clinking sound, like memories brushing softly against one another. She told me watching it helped her feel grounded. It reminds me that even when life slows down, she said, the world keeps dancing. You can create your own branch mobile with just a handful of materials and a comfortable place to sit. Choose 2 or 3 branches that balance well when held at their center. Use twine, clear fishing line, or thin wire to suspend each piece from the one above it. Keep adjusting until everything feels steady. Mobiles are built on patience more than precision. Then, add your decorative elements, feathers, dried seed pods, smooth stones, or even painted wooden beads. These touches give the mobile its personality, its little spark of charm. Hang your finished mobile where the wind is gentle, perhaps under a pergola, or in the shade of a tree, where light and air move softly throughout the day. As it spins slowly and changes direction with each breeze, you'll notice how this simple creation brings life to quiet spaces. It's a reminder that beauty doesn't always stand still, and neither do we. Even in stillness, there is movement. Even in age, there is grace. Sometimes the simplest change can breathe new life into a familiar corner of the garden. Decorative twig collars, little sleeves made of vertical twigs tied around plain pots, are one of those small transformations that make you pause and smile. They don't shout for attention. Instead, they add a soft, natural texture that feels warm and grounding. The contrast of rustic wood against green leaves or bright flowers brings a touch of cottage charm, the kind you might find in a cozy backyard tucked behind an old farmhouse. And because the materials come straight from fallen branches, each collar tells its own quiet story. Years ago, I visited an older couple, the Parkers, who were well into their 70s and loved container gardening because it saved their backs and knees. Their little patio was filled with mismatched plastic pots they'd collected over the years. Not pretty, but practical. One afternoon, Mrs. Parker showed me how she covered them with simple twig collars made from trimmings after a storm. She sat comfortably in her weathered rocking chair, trimming twigs to the same height and tying them around her pots with soft jute twine. I may not decorate much indoors anymore, she said, but my pots still deserve to feel dressed up. When she slid the finished collar around a plain pot of marigolds, the whole thing looked transformed, earthy, charming, and far more expensive than it truly was. What touched me most was the pride in her eyes. She didn't just decorate her garden, she cared for it the way one cares for an old friend. Making your own twig collars is gentle work that can be done seated at a table or patio chair. Gather twigs roughly the height of your pot, snapping them to size with your hands or using lightweight cutters. Bundle them around the pot and secure the top and bottom with twine or thin rope. The magic happens when the collar hugs the container, instantly turning something ordinary into something warm and handmade. You can create matching sets of different heights or mix and match for a more whimsical look. Over time, the twigs will soften in color, taking on lovely gray tones that blend beautifully with terracotta, ceramic, or even plastic. These twig collars remind us that creativity doesn't always require sweeping changes. Sometimes, it's the small, tender touches that make a space feel truly loved. And as you sit back and admire your newly dressed pots, you might feel a spark of joy knowing your hands shaped something beautiful, something that invites others to slow down and appreciate the details. Every garden has a few corners. We tend to overlook the places where an old stump leans quietly, or a dead standing tree waits for someone to decide what to do with it. Many people see those remnants as eyesores or reminders of storms and seasons past. But with a little imagination, those same forgotten trunks can become bold and beautiful pieces of art. When you paint an old tree, whether with soft, earthy tones or bright, lively patterns, you transform something once lifeless into a striking focal point. It's a way of giving dignity back to the tree, while adding a layer of personality to your space. I once visited a retired park ranger named Bill, a man in his 70s, with a slow, steady voice and a love for preserving stories from nature. Behind his house stood the skeleton of a once grand pine tree, long dead, but still rooted deeply. Instead of cutting it down, he decided to honor it. He painted swirling blues and greens up the trunk, mimicking the movement of wind and water. Two things he'd spent his career observing. He added small touches of gold where branches once existed, calling them sun memories. When I asked him why he bothered, he smiled and replied, "Just because something stops growing doesn't mean it stops mattering." That painted tree became a landmark in his garden, a conversation piece, and a reminder of life's cycles. It brought him joy each morning when he opened his back door. You can create your own tree sculpture with surprisingly little effort. Choose outdoor paints, spray paint for smooth coverage, or acrylics for more detailed designs. Sit comfortably while painting the areas within reach. There's no need to stretch or strain. You might paint geometric shapes, flowing vines, gentle stripes, or even simple dots. Let your creativity decide. As the seasons pass, the paint will weather, naturally softening into beautifully faded tones that feel harmonious with the garden. Instead of looking like a harsh, artificial decoration, the tree becomes a living memory, an artistic echo of what once stood tall. This project offers a lovely reminder: beauty doesn't always depend on what's alive or perfect. Sometimes it comes from honoring what remains, giving it a second life, and letting your garden become a gallery that tells stories only you could paint. There's a timeless charm to a garden teepee, especially one built from fallen branches. It brings a touch of old-fashioned homestead wisdom into even the smallest backyard. A teepee doesn't just support climbing vegetables, it adds a sense of structure and purpose, like a small landmark rising above the soil. What I love most is how gentle this project is on the body. You don't need to kneel, lift heavy lumber, or fuss with complicated measurements. The branches do most of the work for you, leaning into one another the way neighbors lean in during times of need. I once helped a man named Thomas, a soft-spoken Vietnam veteran in his early 70s, put together a teepee in his garden. He'd taken up growing pole beans because they reminded him of summers spent with his grandmother in rural Kentucky. His mobility was limited after a hip replacement, so we worked slowly, making sure every step felt comfortable. We gathered 7 straight branches from a fallen oak limb and tied them at the top, while he sat on a sturdy patio chair, guiding the process with a patient eye. When we spread the branches out to form the familiar cone shape, he let out a warm chuckle. "Looks just like Grandma's," he said, tapping one of the branches with a sense of quiet pride. By midsummer, those pole beans had climbed all the way to the top, wrapping the structure in a curtain of green. He told me he'd sit in the evenings and watch the leaves rustle, remembering his grandmother's stories with every breeze. To build your own teepee, choose 5 to 7 branches of similar length and thickness, something you can comfortably lift without strain. Gather the tops together and tie them with soft jute or garden twine. Then gently spread the bases outward in a circle, pressing them lightly into the soil or weighing them down with stones. If reaching down is difficult, ask a neighbor or place the bases into heavy planters instead of the ground. As climbing vegetables, beans, peas, cucumbers, or even vining flowers grow, they'll wrap around the branches, naturally creating a living sculpture that changes with the seasons. A teepee brings height, beauty, and nostalgia to a garden. And every time you see those vines climbing upward, you'll be reminded that growth doesn't always happen quickly, but it does happen little by little with patience and quiet support. There's a quiet poetry in the way branches bend softly, reluctantly, but always with the memory of the wind that shaped them. When you use those flexible branches to weave a hollow sphere, you're not just making garden art. You're creating a sculptural moment, something that feels ancient and modern at the same time. Woven branch spheres have a way of catching the eye without demanding attention. They sit in the garden like gentle guardians, letting sunlight filter through their gaps and casting shadows that shift with every hour. It's one of those projects that looks complicated, but is surprisingly calming to create, especially when you work slowly and let the branches find their natural curves. I once visited a widower named June, a former florist in her late 70s who spent her afternoons weaving things, crowns, wreaths, tiny baskets, just to keep her hands moving after years of arthritis. One spring, she showed me a set of branch spheres she had made during a time when loneliness felt heavy. Each sphere was made from willow switches gathered along her fence line. She told me she'd sit at her garden table gently bending and layering each branch while humming old hymns her mother used to sing. "There's something healing about weaving," she said softly. "Every piece supports the next." I think that's how people work too. Those spheres sat throughout her garden, some nestled among lavender, others hanging by twine under a tree. When the sun hit them at dusk, the open weave glowed like lanterns. She said it made her feel accompanied even on the quietest days. You can make your own woven spheres without kneeling or straining. Choose long, flexible branches, willow, young maple, or any green branch that bends without snapping. Begin by forming a loose circle, tying or tucking the ends into place. Then add branch after branch, weaving and looping as you go, letting imperfections give character to the shape. There's no wrong way to do it. If holding a full sphere feels awkward, rest it on your lap or a table while you work. Once finished, place the sphere on a pedestal, tuck it into a flower bed, or hang it from a tree where breezes can move through its openings. Over time, the wood will weather to a soft silver, becoming even more beautiful as the seasons pass. A woven sphere carries a gentle lesson. Beauty doesn't always require straight lines or perfect forms. Sometimes, it's born from the willingness to bend to layer and to trust that everything will hold together in the end. There's something timeless about a garden swing. A quiet invitation to pause, breathe, and feel like a child again, even if only for a moment. When you craft a swing from a sturdy fallen branch, you're not just building a place to sit. You're creating a gentle refuge, a spot where memories can settle softly and new ones can take shape. A branch swing doesn't need frills or perfection. Its charm lies in simplicity. The worn texture of the wood, the curve of the bark, the gentle sway that comes when the wind nudges it. It becomes a reminder that rest is an essential part of tending to both our gardens and our spirits. I remember a man named Walter, a retired machinist in his early 80s, who lived on a quiet property surrounded by lilac bushes. His wife had passed several years prior, and though he kept busy with his vegetable beds, he admitted that the days sometimes felt long and still. One spring afternoon, he showed me a thick branch he'd found after a storm, a beautifully shaped piece with smooth bark and a slight natural arc. Instead of tossing it aside, he sanded it lightly while sitting on his porch, taking his time with every stroke. He drilled 2 simple holes at each end, threaded strong rope through them, and hung the swing from a sturdy beam on his pergola. When he eased himself onto it, the swing moved gently, almost as if the garden were welcoming him. "I forgot how good it feels," he murmured, eyes closing, as a breeze carried the scent of lilacs. Over time, that swing became his evening ritual, a place to reflect, remember, and simply exist without rushing. You can create a similar haven in your own garden without strain. Choose a branch thick enough to feel solid beneath you, something you can lift comfortably, or ask a neighbor to help place it. Smooth the top surface with light sanding, keeping the bark if you love its texture. Drill holes near each end, thread natural rope or outdoor cord through, and secure it with strong knots. Instead of tying it to a high tree limb, you can hang it from a pergola beam or a pre-made frame within easy reach. Add a cushion if you like, or leave it plain for that rustic charm. When you settle onto the swing, let yourself sway gently and breathe in the quiet. It doesn't matter how old we grow, something inside us still responds to the simple joy of being carried softly by the air. A branch swing is more than a garden seat. It's a reminder that rest is not indulgence, it's nourishment. And in those moments when you sway back and forth, feeling the weight lift from your shoulders, you may realize that nature isn't just a place you tend. It's a place that tends to you too. There's a special kind of joy that comes from giving imagination a little room to stretch, especially in the garden where nature's shapes already hint at stories waiting to be told. When you use fallen branches to create whimsical animal sculptures, you're bringing a bit of playful spirit into your outdoor space. These pieces don't need to be perfect or lifelike. In fact, the charm lies in their crooked legs, uneven ears, and quirky angles. They stand proudly among the flowers, like friendly little guardians watching over your garden beds. And each sculpture carries the quiet satisfaction of knowing you transformed something forgotten into something full of character. I once met a woman named Marion, a retired nurse in her late 70s with the brightest laugh you've ever heard. After losing her husband, she found comfort in crafting animal figures from branches she collected on her daily walks. One looked like a long-legged deer with a crooked neck, another like a plump rabbit with 2 big ears, and a third resembled a bird perched mid-song. She told me each sculpture reminded her of someone she loved, her husband's tall frame, her daughter's favorite childhood pet, her late father's habit of whistling as he worked in the garden. Marion would sit on her porch with a basket of twigs and a small handsaw, assembling each piece, slowly letting the natural shapes guide her. "I'm not creating animals," she said with a grin. "I'm creating memories dressed up as animals." Her garden felt alive in a completely different way, full of personality stories and gentle humor. You can create your own little garden friends without heavy lifting or complicated tools. Look for branches with interesting shapes. A bent one might become a leg, a forked one, a pair of ears, a knobby one, a head. Use lightweight outdoor screws, strong adhesive, or short pieces of wire to connect the parts. Work while seated if it feels more comfortable. These sculptures are built from small sections that can be handled easily. Start simple: a bird, a rabbit, maybe a quirky little fox. Let the branches tell you what they want to become. Place your finished creatures among the flowers near a garden bench or beside a stepping stone path. As the wood weathers, the sculptures will blend beautifully with the landscape, growing more charming each year. Branch animals bring a sense of wonder back into the garden. They remind us that creativity isn't about precision. It's about playfulness, courage, and the willingness to see potential where others see debris. And in a world that often feels heavy, a little whimsy can be powerful medicine. Before we part ways today, dear friend, I want to linger for a moment on the heart of everything we've explored together. Fallen branches might seem like small, insignificant things, just part of the natural clutter that gathers after storms or long seasons. But when we pause long enough to look at them closely, they become reminders of something deeper that beauty often lives in. The overlooked, the weathered, the imperfect. Every project we've discussed, from rustic trellises to playful animal sculptures, begins with a simple shift in perspective. Instead of throwing something away, we choose to see what it could become. That choice is powerful. It invites creativity, reduces waste, and nurtures a quiet confidence that stays with us long after the work is done. I once heard an older gardener say, "The world gives you gifts every day. You just have to be willing to receive them." And standing among the branches scattered across your backyard, you might realize how true that really is. Life continues to offer you moments of inspiration no matter your age or your limitations. You don't need strength or perfect health or expensive materials to create beauty. You only need patience, imagination, and a willingness to try. Even the smallest effort, tying twine around a twig, bending a branch into a frame, painting a stump with gentle strokes, becomes a quiet act of resilience. It's proof that your hands still know how to shape the world around you in tender, meaningful ways. As you look toward your next gardening day, I hope you remember that creativity has no expiration date. Your wisdom, your steady hands, your years of lived experience. These are treasures that younger gardeners can't yet understand. Every project you make becomes a reflection of your journey, your memories, your joy. So choose one idea from today's visit and try it. Let it bring you peace, pride, and a touch of magic. And if you'd like to continue finding beauty in simple things, I hope you'll join me again. Share this video with someone who might need a spark of inspiration, subscribe for more gentle garden ideas, and keep tending your world with love. Until next time, dear friend, happy gardening.